The word of the day is love. We're going to be looking, the passage we're going to be looking at is 1 Corinthians 13. So if y'all want to open up there real quick. So, overall, I was looking at a lot of different things. And biblically, there's 4 types of love. There's the first, which is kind of the romantic or sexual form of love, which is eros, which is kind of the love between a husband and wife. The second one, which is friendly love. I think the words I'm giving you guys are all the Greek words and kind of what they mean to us as Americans speaking English. Is going to be phileo, I think. Philie. It's what you feel between you and a friend. It's a strong emotional connection. To do this, you have to have a personal relationship. So when you have a positive personal relationship with someone, this is kind of love that is exhibited between those two. Come join us. Third is going to be storge. I think it's storge, but I could be wrong. Storge. This is kind of like the love between a family, between a father-son, father-daughter, between brothers. It's between people that have more than a personal relationship between them, a connection by something greater, whether it's blood, marriage, or God. And then finally, the last one is the one we're going to be talking about today, is the love of God. And this one, I'm sure I'm pronouncing this right. It's agape. It's pretty fun. Agape. But this one's different than the other loves, because most of the other loves are kind of like a feeling or something that, when you have a strong relationship with someone, you can feel that y'all are friends. When you're romantically involved with someone, you can feel that y'all are friends. Agape is not as much of a feeling. It's more shown through our actions. One way to put it is it's kind of like the moral principle. It's the love that God showed all of us before He got to know us. Probably the most popular usage of this love is John 3:16. For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him shall have eternal life. And that term of love, they use this word, agape. So it's kind of saying that God did this for us, not because He already had a strong emotional connection with us, not because we were already family, but because He was inclined to do good unto others and help us and do the right thing. And so as you can see, this form of love is pretty important. It's also the most mentioned type of love in the New Testament, which is, that should make it pretty important to us over all the others already. And so I think a really good passage that we can learn a lot about agape, this type of love, is in 1 Corinthians 13. And just a quick note that all this stuff that's being said right here, while parts of it are applicable to other types of love, this passage is focused on this type of love, what you should do to everyone you encounter, how you should treat everyone you encounter, people you don't even have a relationship with, and just how you should act in that. So does anyone have 1 Corinthians 13 pulled up and want to start with 1 through 3 for me?
I can get it.
You got it?
1 Corinthians 3. 1 Corinthians what?
1 Corinthians 13.
All right.
1 through 3, what version?
1 through 3. The iPhone version.
And I think.
Okay, 1 through 3.
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. So the subtitle is Love is Indispensable. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not love, I am nothing. If I give all I am to the poor, and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not love, I gain nothing.
Okay. Someone want to tell me what those kind of verses are saying real quick about this kind of love? Take a shot at it. Let's go. Do you want to say something? No? Okay. Basically, it talks about either a spiritual gift or an awesome act we can do, and then it goes and tells us, well, if you don't do it with love, it's not important. it's irrelevant. He says, if I give away everything I own, so you give everything you have to the poor, and I give over my body, so you completely give yourself up, which are things he asks us to do, but you don't do it lovingly, then he says that's completely useless. So I kind of have this divided up into a when, what, and why section. So this is kind of the when portion. And what I have for this is all actions are meaningless without love. If you're not doing something without a loving intention, then right here God's saying that it's meaningless, and He's not accounting for it as a good deed. It's kind of like when you're a little kid, and your parents would tell you like, go clean your room, and you'd say no like 5 times, and then you get all mad and like you finally go clean your room, but you do it all upset while you're throwing everything down and like slamming doors. Like that's the kind of attitude God does not want us to have while we're doing good unto others. He wants us to do it lovingly, not just because He tells us to, but because we want to help others out in that sense. So the next part, I think it's 4 through 7. 4 through 7. This is kind of the what about love. Someone want to get this? Bradley?
Yeah. How far?
4 through 7.
Right. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things.
A couple people, what are y'all's favorite qualities? Just one quality. What's your favorite one out of that kind of list? The shadow. What? Love is not boastful.
Patience.
Rejoices. What?
It's not self-seeking.
Not self-seeking. So as y'all can see, like there's a lot of different qualities of love right there. I mean, I think he listed 14 different things that love is not, or that love will do. The best way I could think to summarize this up was love lovingly. Just like when you're trying to love on someone, do it how you think you're supposed to love on someone. Don't do it trying to prove yourself. Don't do it rashly, harshly. Do it patiently, do it kindly, rejoicing in truth. And I think at the end is kind of neat. In verse 7, he talks about it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That'll speak to how we're going into this next section. But it talks about how love can support you through everything. It doesn't like give limitations there or anything. Love believes all things. When it's saying all, it's really not. It's showing that there's not really any limits to what this love can do, which is pretty neat. And then I'll transfer into our last point right here. Does someone want to read 8 to the end of the chapter? Actually, no, go ahead and read 8 through 10 right now. Someone want to read 8 through 10?
Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be still. Where there is knowledge, they will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears.
Okay. So the most important part, I think we take it out, right, is the very first word. Love never ends. He says it right there. Love never ends. Love will always be enduring. Doesn't end. And then he goes on in the next 3 verses to talk about how other things will fail, how other things won't be good enough, how, and it talks about, it says, but when what is perfect comes, the partial will be set aside. He's talking about when Jesus comes back. He's saying that those spiritual gifts that you've been honing, that you've been working on, they're not going to be important anymore. Love's all that's going to be left. So while it's a good thing to be working on, being able to teach, being able to exercise your spiritual gifts musically, being able to communicate to others, and just share your faith and working on all those spiritual gifts, he's talking right here that doing all those lovingly is more important than all those spiritual gifts combined. Someone want to pick up 11 and 12?
child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child, I read like a child. When I became a man, I came to college and now we see in the mirror dimly. For now we see in the mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, and I shall know fully, and I have been fully known.
Okay, so I think those two verses are really confusing. I read those like yesterday. I tried like 3 different translations, and they didn't make sense to me. And then I Googled some commentaries, and like after 10 minutes, they kind of made sense to me. Does anyone want to take a shot at what they're saying at first? Anyone want to be risky? 1 Corinthians 13.
Long letter from Christ was back, face to face. That's kind of what I know. I kind of heard something about this.
Yeah.
I know the face to face part of Christ was back.
Yeah. So there's kind of like, yeah, he's right. He's talking about Christ coming back. There's kind of 2 analogies here. The first one he talks about when he's a child. He's a child. And then he becomes an adult, and he did away with the childish ways. Becoming an adult is him, the analogy to Christ coming back. And he's showing the child is all the things you do before Christ is coming back. So just as when you're an adult, you're not going to do the same things you did as a kid because you passed those things are no longer needed, no longer relevant. When Christ comes back and there's no longer a need for spiritual gifts, you're no longer going to need those. But love will still be there. And the second part is also pretty confusing. For now we see in a mirror indirectly, but then we'll see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I've been fully known. And so there's a lot of different stuff you can take out of this, but basically it's just saying, right now we're not completely with God, but eventually we'll be face to face with God. And in the same way that when you have, make a little analogy here. So when you're trying to get light, and the sun's outside, and you go outside, you got whatever, a flashlight, you're using your phone, there's street lamps, and those are kind of like the spiritual gifts we're using to light up. But then once the sun comes out, you don't need any of those things. And the sun's kind of like Jesus. Once we're face to face with Jesus, we're not going to need any of those other spiritual gifts, those other things that we've been working with on earth. I know I've been talking a lot about spiritual gifts and how those won't be relevant once we see Jesus. Those are still awesome things. And the only reason that we're talking about that is to show how important and how crucial love is. So I'm going to read verse 13. And now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. So right there, last verse, it's talking about when everything else is gone, there'll be faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. Love conquers all and abides forever.
Very eloquent.
I mean, basically, it's kind of repetitive these last 5 verses, and the reason, or last 6 verses, but the reason something's repeated is because it's important. It's just really important to remember that love is everything, and love will abide forever. Does anyone else have any thoughts, comments, concerns? The verse is kind of like really focused on love, but then kind of pauses those 2 things in there and shows that they're both really important as well. Anyone else got anything I want to say?
One thing was like, in like the Gospels, like the greatest commandment was love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. So like Tim was saying, love is the most important thing. You know, God kind of said it right there. You know, if that was like the 2 most important things He wants you to do, then just kind of.
Going back to what he said, God says love your neighbor or love your enemy. This is the type of love that you're supposed to show to them. You're not going to be able to show filio, a strong emotional connection between friends. You're not going to show any of the other types of love. But we should still have the agape, that just overall wanting to do good and help them out. That's something that we are able to show to everyone. And we should show to everyone. It's something that can help distinguish motivation as a Christian because very few people in our culture do that.
Going back to 11 and 12, I think like another way you can interpret that is like with the love of God in our lives, like if we have the love of God in our lives, that can also help us mature. And like what you were saying earlier about like how we should love our neighbor using agape, that I think is another way that we can mature. Like it says in the second verse, we see fully in the mirror, I guess. So, like it's talking about Christ, but I think it could also like if we want to relate it to our lives now, like we can mature more if we have God in our lives and we use that for purpose.
You learn a lot with that, of like the neighbors, but also like you have to treat us like kind of go to the treat others like you would want to be treated. Love, if you do everything with love, people will respect you, and I feel like you would like accomplish so much more than like if you instead of hating someone, you love someone and you like respect it, and you just get a lot farther than you're doing what God wants you to do. You're not hating on someone, you're loving them and caring for them.
Anything else? Okay. Let's wrap it up real quick. When? Love all the time because everything's meaningless without love. What? Love lovingly. Do it in a loving manner. Do it how God wants you to do. Why? Because love abides forever and conquers all. We're going to do prayer requests now. We're going to go ahead and do prayer requests.